Hi, Todd. Can you hear us?
Good morning, I can.
Perfect. We hear you great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Commissioner Clark. Can you hear us?
I can, Janelle. Thank you.
Thank you. We hear you great. Hi, Paul. How can you hear us good?
Yes, I'm still adjusting my headphones here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you great. Thank you. Paul, I'm just going to mute you, okay?
Uh,
Hello, Commissioner Swanson. Can you hear us?
Yes. Good morning, Janelle.
Good morning. We hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thanks.
Janelle, could we just do a quick follow-up sound check?
Sure, Paul. We hear you loud and clear.
Great, thank you.
You bet. Good morning, Amanda. I just want to sound check you and just in case you need to jump in for any reason.
It would help if I unmuted myself. I can hear you.
Thank you. We hear you. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Murphy.
Good morning, Janelle.
Great. We hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Great.
Good morning, Commissioner Havel.
Good morning, Janelle.
Wonderful. We hear you. Thank you.
President Hovel, I will have, if you could pause before you act on the consent calendar, I have something to call to the commission's attention.
Good morning, Commissioner Foster.
Good morning.
Thank you. We hear you well. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Bookland. And good morning, Commissioner Eskridge.
Good morning, Janelle.
Thank you. We hear you.
Great.
Commissioner Bookland, I might have jumped the gun a little bit on you. Can you hear us now? Good morning, Bruce. Can you do a sound check for us, please?
Yeah, I can hear you now, John. I got the last, yeah, you got a little early on me. Yep, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bookland, can you hear us?
Good morning. Yes, I can. Loud
There
and
we go.
clear.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hmm.
Just a reminder for Commissioner Havel and Michael that Commissioner Wilson was excused from today's meeting.
Thank you, Janelle.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Tom's excused, but has Ezra shown up yet?
Commissioner Meyer is not yet on.
Okay, welcome, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to all of our guests. I didn't scroll down yet to see who we have. Okay, Janelle, you want to go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Certainly. So good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for us all. Number 1, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number 2, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, in general, please have your cameras on if possible. If you are speaking, you may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. And that goes for staff as well. And number 4, as a reminder, the public chat feature has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. And the meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So that is all I have for this morning. Let's have a great meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. That'll take us to announcements. Michael, do you have any announcements?
I do not, President Hubble.
Okay, the consent calendar. Michael, you had something you wanted to provide?
I do. Item 3D on the consent calendar, I'd like to call to the commission's attention. One of the sewer extensions is the Kettle Creek Phase 4 project in the city of Verona. In reviewing the extension, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, CARPC, noted non-conformance with stormwater regional plans and did not issue the normal 208 letter that the district requires to approve extensions. Normally, this would stop us from approving the extension. However, the Department of Natural Resources reviewed the plans late last week and determined that this phase is consistent with the wastewater collection and treatment provisions of the amended Dane County Water Quality Plan. This also happened with Kettle Creek North phases 2 and 3. Some of the commissioners may recall in August 2018. We've worked with our legal staff, Paul Kent, and he advises us that the DNR approval is sufficient for us to approve the extension request. And this is what we did in phases 2 and 3, and we're recommending the commission approve in phase 4. We are anticipating future extensions of Kettle Creek North, and we have, and with the approval of this phase, the DNR did clarify that no additional sewer extensions beyond this phase will be reviewed by the department until Dane County Water Quality Management Plan is updated, or the project also conforms with the conditions. So that's a lot of wording, but I just wanted to let you know that we've deviated slightly from our normal process. And other than that, the consent calendar is ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So on the consent calendar, we have the approval of the minutes from the last meeting, the cash statement for operating cash statement for capital projects, the review and approval of the sanitary sewer extensions, the 3 new, which includes the Kettle Creek North, and then 2 reconstruction, then an award of contract for the West Interceptor Shorewood Relief. I think it was the Strand. Do we have any questions before we get a motion? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
This is Commissioner Eskridge. I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Eskridge. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Bookland. I'll second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Eskridge, seconded by Commissioner Bookland to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, that will take us to topics. Todd, you're up with the first quarter sewer service charges.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Todd Giebert, Capital Planning Engineer for the district. Here to report on the first quarter service charges. As we all know, 2020 was a very challenging year for businesses across the country, and water and sewer utilities were certainly no exception, including the district. As you'll recall, we were about $1.8 million below budget for last year. This quarter, in the first quarter of 2021, revenues are just over $11.1 million. This is notable for a couple of reasons. The first is we've never been actually above $10 million in any quarter for collections, and we actually crested $11 million this quarter. The second reason is that you're showing a surplus here in the first quarter of about $438,000. That is somewhat rare for the first quarter of any given year, and that's illustrated in this slide, which is basically showing over the last 5 years how our collections compare to the budgeted revenue. So in the first quarter, we're usually at about 98% of collections, and kind of move up to quarter three as our best quarter as far as revenues, and then it tails back down in the fourth quarter. So I think it's safe to say that if you're showing a surplus in the first quarter, you are probably going to show a surplus for the remainder of the year as well. So this is a slide showing the usual breakdown of the surplus among the 7 billing parameters. There's a couple different stories going on here. The first, of course, is that we're showing a lot of blue here. 6 of the 7 billing parameters are above budget for the first quarter. In particular, the 4 pollutant parameters, and notably CBOD and total solids, are showing quite big surpluses for the first quarter. The main reason for this is, as you may recall, when we set rates for 2021, we didn't know the course of the pandemic at that time. Things were not in a very good place. And so we assumed that loadings in 2021 would be very similar to 2020, notably the quarters 2 and 3. So we made pretty drastic reductions in loadings, and that results in the surpluses you see here because loadings have actually increased, and I'll get to that in a little bit. The second story, of course, is volume is kind of trending the other way as it normally does in the first quarter. We've had 6 months of pretty dry weather, and so we're a little behind on volume so far. So I mentioned volume, and here's the plot we show at rate setting every year. The magenta line, of course, is the budgeted flow rate that we're setting. And then the blue dots are the actual flows. So you can see back in quarter 3, would be right here, when we set the budget, we dropped at 8%, and the flows have actually gone even lower than that since then. It's a little easier to see on this plot, which shows the same data, but also on monthly flows instead of quarterly flows. Again, we set rates back here in quarter 3, dropped the flow to 8%, but you see how the flows have really tailed off in quarter 4 and bottoming out in January. One thing to note here is how we set the flow rate. There's a number of things we take into account, but one of them is for the next year, we try to set the flow rate about 2 million gallons per day higher than what we think it'll be in December. So back in October of last year, we thought the flow would get down to about 38.5 MGD. So we set the budgeted flow rate for the next year at 40.7. You see it's dipped a little bit below that, but not horribly so. The other thing to note here is that this is not unprecedented. You can see back in 2018, we had a similar low flow rate of 36.7 MGD. And of course, we all know what happened in 2018 and remainder of that year with the storms in August, that we actually had a surplus in volume for that year. So I think volume's in decent shape. One final thing I guess I'll note on this slide with respect to volume is you see the choppiness. And obviously that's a wet weather component, inflow and infiltration. And you'll note that the next item on the agenda today is a talk about inflow and infiltration and how the district tends to deal with that going forward and control that. While the district doesn't have a huge problem with I&I, certainly it will help, controlling that will help with billing. It'll kind of reduce some of the sensitivity in this volume parameter that we've seen over the years. So kind of just setting the stage for the next agenda item. Turning now more to the pollutant loadings. This is just a summary. Again, I noted the reductions that we made in loading estimates from 2020 to 2021, volume 8%. Then you see CBOD 11%, solids 8.5%, and then nitrogen, phosphorus both 5.5%. Those are pretty big swings again. And again, looking at the same kind of plot for CBOD to the plant, you can see here again, here's that 11% drop. And then loads actually in the fourth quarter went the other way of last year and into this year. And actually in this quarter of 2021, the loadings are as high as they've been in 5-year history, kind of going back to 2018. So there definitely has been a rebound, I guess, in the local economy. And we're certainly seeing that here at the plant. You see a similar story for total solids, very much the same pattern. And even plant total phosphorus, which tends to be our most stable parameter, very little fluctuation, quarter to quarter and year to year. Even that has rebounded in quarter 4 and into quarter 1. So you might be asking, what does this due to, or where is it coming from? We didn't see this increase in any of our local monitoring points, the municipalities that we monitor. We monitor everybody. Just as a refresher, we monitor every customer that we have except the city of Madison. They're figured out by difference, but we didn't see that in any of the customer communities. But we do monitor CBOD and other pollutants at the pump stations that pump to the plant. So in looking at that data, you see pump stations 8 and 11, which are the orange and red lines. These tend to be more residential in nature, the service areas. And we saw very little fluctuation over the last 2 years in loadings to the plant, indicating that the increases are not coming from there, and there was no reductions either over the last year or so. Compare that against pump station 2, which is located in downtown Madison, the western part of the isthmus. Lots of institutional and commercial uses in this basin, notably the UW-Madison campus. And that's where we saw a lot of the drop last year. Very understandable. Less people on campus in the downtown area. But where we're really seeing the increase now is in our pump station 7 and 18 service area. You see here, this climbing leg here from quarter 4 to quarter 1, almost 10,000 pounds per day. This is really the eastern part of our collection system, all the way from Village of Dane in the north down to the town of Pleasant Springs in the south. So where we think this is coming in again is probably from the city of Madison, some of their larger commercial and industrial users in that basin. This then is reflected in the city of Madison's bill. You can see that they're a little, I guess, ahead of budget at 26.6% for the year due to those increased pollutant loadings that we're seeing. So that's all I have today for the bills. Our requested action today is the commission approve the sewer service charges for the first quarter of 2021 through approval of resolution R7. And I'd be happy to take any questions that the commission may have on the service charges.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the first quarter sewer service charges?
I'm happy to make that motion, Commissioner Meyer.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Clark. Okay, any further comments or discussion? Okay, no, something, just a minute here, my screen went odd. Okay, no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's see, that will take us to the inflow and infiltration reduction program. Jen, I think you're going to lead this off.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hummel. All right. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jen Hurlbus, Collection System Engineer at the district. It's been a little over a year since I last presented to you on the Inflow and Infiltration Reduction Program. But as Todd gave me a nice lead in for today's topic, I think it's to note that inflow and infiltration has come up at several of the commission meetings with various topics, energy management, chlorides. So it's definitely integral to all of the district's activities. So since I last spoke to you, we've been working with the Technical Advisory Committee and have completed the program plan, which outlines a program framework and recommended next steps for taking the program through development to implementation. This study session today is to give an overview of the program and receive commission guidance. To start, I'd like to recap what is inflow and infiltration and why is the district working on the reduction program. So inflow is stormwater and infiltration is groundwater that gets into the sanitary sewer system through various sources or defects in the collection system. Stormwater and groundwater do not need treatment at the plant. If the clear water getting in is more than what the sewer is designed to convey, basement backups and sanitary sewer overflows may occur. As this figure shows, there are many possible sources for inflow and infiltration, or what we refer to often as II. While studies have shown that over 50% of II is from private property, it can also occur in the local sewers and district interceptors. District manholes and interceptors tend to be deeper in groundwater and in other low areas that can be prone to flooding. When looking at reducing the inflow and infiltration into our system, we really need to look at the entire collection system. This includes the local mains and private laterals. So collaboration with our owner communities is key to overall I&I reduction. As we saw in the August 2018 event, inflow and infiltration can stress the collection system and cause sanitary sewer overflows, such as the top example picture. These are two examples of how II can impact district flows. In the top graph, flow rises and returns to normal levels quickly, which indicates an inflow source, not necessarily infiltration. In the bottom graph, however, the flow it does rise quickly, but it takes longer to return to normal flow levels due to prolonged stormwater flooding and higher groundwater levels. We see some of this lower or longer response in areas that are near the lake too, when the lake levels were higher after that large storm event. So the overall goal for the district's II program is to maintain the flow standards defined by the district's sewer use ordinance. Or more simply put, we want to reduce the peak flow to within 4 times the average daily flow. Owner community meetings held in 2019 identified II reduction as a top priority for our communities. II reduction is included in the district's strategic plan and supports the commission outcome policies. Having a program focused on inflow and infiltration reduction builds owner confidence that wastewater is collected and treated in a manner that is consistently safe, reliable, efficient, environmentally responsible, and forward-thinking. II reduction also supports the Commission's reliability ideal established in the 2019 Commission strategic planning. And more specifically, inflow and infiltration reduction provides value to the district and our owner communities by increasing resilience to changing weather patterns, deferring needs for capital increases, improving system performance, and meeting regulatory requirements. So our first step for the program was to develop a program framework and implementation strategy. The district hired Brown and Caldwell in 2020, and the II reduction program plan was completed in March of 2021. Full report was included in the commission packet for your reference. Very early into this project, we formed an advisory committee to help with developing the program framework. Members of the committee are Mark Motor, City of Madison, Theron Jacobson, City of Verona, Ben Kohlenbrook, Town of Dunn, Bob Anderson, Town of Westport, Jim Hessling, Village of McFarland, and Davis Clark, Village of Windsor. We wanted to make sure we were having a panel that represented as much of our communities and interests. A city has different interests than a town does, or different challenges. So we were trying to make sure that we had a group that would help develop a program that will work for all of our owner communities. So the committee has met 6 times since January of 2020. The first meeting was held in person, and we reviewed 6 II reduction programs throughout the United States, each with different approaches on how they address II reduction. When the pandemic sent us all home in March, we sent out a survey to keep the project moving, and then adjusted to meeting virtually for the remaining meetings. A notable result was the committee's recommendation that each community's financial contribution to the program be directed at the community's own II improvement needs. So some II programs instead spend pooled resources on a regional basis to try to target dollars to the greatest regional benefit. The proposed program framework was adjusted to address the concerns about the more of having local control of funds. So as we work through program development, we will need to balance providing appropriate regional benefits while respecting local control of funds. So the program framework, our goal for the district's II reduction program is to maintain the flow standards defined by the district's sewer use ordinance. That sounds simple. It's definitely more complicated as we start diving into the details, and there is more discussion to occur on defining what the flow standards are, kind of, is there a cap of the limit, what all that means. But the ultimate goal is to maintain the flow standards defined by the district sewer use ordinance. So the program components, I broke them down into kind of 5 main steps for doing this program. So, and these are district services. So the district would provide administration of the regional II reduction program. We plan to provide technical support and education resources to our owner communities, with an emphasis given on reducing private property II sources. The private property II is probably the one that's the most gray for everybody, or just don't really know how to start. It's very personal, and it's something that we want to make sure that we can help our owner communities as we start trying to work on reducing private property II. Then the district sewer use ordinance will need to be updated to establish the program and refine the program metrics. This is a public process that will take time, and we have some work to do before we're ready to propose any changes to the ordinance. And then once we have defined our metrics with the sewer use ordinance, then the district will begin to monitor for compliance with the sewer use ordinance standards. Flow monitoring is the expected method for measuring compliance. And then finally, for those areas that exceed the flow standards, notice would be given to a community, and that community would begin developing a work plan to reduce their II. The district would review and work with the community to approve that work plan for the areas that are non-compliant. But communities would be doing the work to reduce II in their systems. So in the next 2 years, more work is needed to update the collection system hydraulic model and develop a flow monitoring plan. This will help the district evaluate how the regional system responds to wet weather events and assess the level of risk. In parallel, the district will continue to work with the advisory committee and begin engaging all of the district's owner communities to guide program development. The district will need to engage with all of the owner communities before we formalize the program or propose changes to the sewer use ordinance. We expect many questions on how the program will impact each community. More work is needed to fully answer anticipated questions, but starting the conversations early will help the district develop a successful program. So as this figure shows, we've proposed a 5-year ramp-up plan, and we've provided yearly cost estimates along the bottom of the table. Please note that these are only district costs. The annual operating cost estimate at $500,000 per year is once in year 5 is the expected annual costs going forward after that year. Based on this schedule, that would be reached in year 5 or 2026. In addition to the program funds, district staff proposes adding a FTE position starting in 2023, as you will see with the top green bar in this graph. That position would be to support general engineering services that will be difficult for me to maintain as the II program workload increases. So a successful program begins with effective leadership and policies. The Commission has an ongoing role in monitoring the inflow and infiltration reduction program and providing policy direction. With that in mind, district staff proposed 4 principles for the program to align with and support the Commission outcome policies. I've shortened these principles in the table to highlight the key points. The program's success, as I've mentioned, is entirely dependent on collaboration with our owner communities, and all 4 principles have elements for building owner confidence in the program. The upper 3 principles are broader statements for guiding the program, kind of more of a commitment to kind of the main purposes for these for the program. Public interests are considered during II program development. This, there's a lot of stakeholders in this, and work has to be done by all of us. We need to adhere to our capacity management, operations, and maintenance, or CMOM, regulatory requirements. Treating excess clear water is not environmentally responsible, efficient, or fiscally responsible. But the bottom principle is the one that I would like to have you maybe provide a little bit of feedback on. It's a little more specific, and it goes to more of what the direction of the program is, what the program framework has for the direction based on the work with the advisory committee. And it's shortened here: balance providing appropriate regional benefits while respecting local control of funds. And in the car, we had 3 bullet points underneath that to try to just to explain what we think needs to be done to do that. And we would seek voluntary compliance before enforcement. We would ensure costs are distributed fairly and reasonably, and we would provide notice to our customers so that they have adequate time to adjust their budgets and charges. So simply put, the proposed program framework does not have the district generating a large regional fund to pay for inflow and infiltration reduction projects. We will be serving in an administrative role, providing technical resources, and monitoring for compliance. The owner communities would do the work to reduce II in their systems. And I point out that the plan is recommendations at this stage. This is a proposed framework. Nothing has been set in stone. We just wanted to get far enough along so that we can start these discussions, and we can adjust accordingly as well. So before we start the study session, are there any questions or comments on these principles?
Anybody have any questions or comments? Jen, I had a couple. You mentioned that your goal is to get the inflow and infiltration down. I think it was to 4 times the average daily flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so how was that determined? Is that determined through a national type of study, or is it determined by examination of the district and what you thought was reasonable and feasible, or what?
Well, the 4 times of the average daily flow is actually currently in our sewer use ordinance.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it is kind of a an accepted industry standard, the 4 times peaking factor. I looked for specific language and references. DNR direction is they define excess clear water as you need to maintain so that you don't have excess. Defining excess is a little fuzzy, to say the least, but the 4 times peaking factor has often been, and that is also based on we've been using what we call the Madison design curve for sizing our sewers since the 60s. And it's anywhere from a 2.5 to a 4 peaking factor, depending on the amount of flow that's in the sewer. So larger diameter pipe doesn't have as high of a peaking factor. It's more of a volume, and it takes longer before you get that response typically. So, we have used that curve to calculate when we are sizing sewers. So, that to me seems reasonable to leave it at that 4 times peaking factor, because that's what we've sized all of our facilities for.
Okay, I got to follow up and then we'll go to Grant and Sarah. So if you're using that same thing since the 60s, have they updated their annual rainfall requirements? I mean, the whole purpose, one of the reasons we're studying this is because rainfall events seem to have gotten more common, large rainfall events. And so the question then is, if they haven't, is that 4 times still a reasonable effort to meet?
The design curve really didn't take into account storm events. It is more of just a straight calculation. But that is a question that I have had when we are saying, if you have an exceedance over the 4 times, do we need to cap it basically at a certain size storm event? What storm is reasonable for us to say you should not have a 4 times peaking factor? If it's a 2-inch rain, fairly frequent event, and you're exceeding that 4 times, I think that is a problem that needs to be addressed. If it's a 50-year storm with 10 inches of rain or 6 inches of rain over a long period of time, well, maybe that's unrealistic as an expectation. So those are details that we definitely need to work on in the next couple of years. Updating that hydraulic model will help us do a sensitivity analysis to see how much of our system is having a problem for varying storm events. So I think once we get that analysis done, we will have much better data to support, is that 4 times a peaking factor reasonable?
I wanted to jump in with what Jen just said. I think that question is a really important one around operating conditions have changed from when our entire collection system was designed and built, and reevaluating what those future operating conditions will be. And that's why in the phases that Jen has laid out, revisiting the sewer use ordinance is a step, but not the first step. It's down after we do more monitoring and evaluation, and redefining what is a 100-year event and what are those design parameters that we should be looking at. So I think we'll be getting back to that question once we have better information to look at that and reevaluate.
Okay, Grant, Sarah, and then Ezra.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Jen. I think most of my questions are around the financial sustainability policy, and particularly the equitable part of it. So what do we know today? What is our ability today to monitor I&I, and how well are we allocating the costs of that to the owner systems today? It's sort of a fundamental question. And then it sounds like the advisor group had a strong recommendation to sort of use local funds for their local improvements. How does that, I guess I'm curious to understand how are we allocating the sort of cost benefits for this entire program? And, you know, if the benefits were equally distributed to all of the owners, then it would make sense that we could cover all those costs at sort of at a district level. How does this all work out so that we're confident, that our owners are confident that whatever money's being spent on the district side is being equitably, you know, the benefits are hitting everybody fairly based on their conditions? And how do we ensure that if two of our owner communities, one that invests a lot of their own money to really reap this, that they're really reaping the benefits of that, and someone who fails to, you know, outside of just a future compliance issue, how do we ensure that the costs of their poor I&I management is going back to them?
Mhm.
I'll take a shot at that, and Jen, then you can answer. You can answer the monitoring piece, which I think is an important part of the question. One of the advantages to our current service charge collection system, and that Todd Giebert just shared with you, is based on flows and loadings. So the more you offer the district in terms of volume, the more you pay. And so there's a built-in incentive for communities to reduce volume charges, and which can be significantly more in wet conditions and with I&I. So there's a built-in incentive there. And since all of these costs that we'll be proposing, most of them will be in the operating budget, service charges will be directly proportional to what you're giving the district in terms of volume. So I feel like it's built in to, if you give us more, you're going to pay more, and you'll pay more for this program if you're giving us more volume. That would be my answer to that equity piece from an owner community standpoint. But Jen, you may be able to answer the second half of that with our monitoring piece.
So right now we rely on pump station data, and then the user charge program does monitor, as Todd mentioned, the areas outside of city of Madison, or except for city of Madison. And so the plan proposes doing that we need more flow monitoring. Pump station data is a little limited. It can dampen the peaks. It's harder to really fully recognize what you're getting. It's great. It gives us information of volume, how the system, you know, is seeing some flow, but it is challenging for true II monitoring. So the plan proposes to have up to 20 temporary flow monitoring sites per year. They would rotate as the program is developed and implemented. And it's not starting right away. Again, when I kind of mentioned the model, we want to get that model updated for wet weather calibration. It's functional for kind of average daily operations flow right now, but the wet weather calibration is outdated and needs to be looked at a little further. As that progresses, we may put in some temporary flow monitoring locations to help with that calibration. And it's a great tool. It's completely dynamic for seeing how the system is all working together, and then that response to the wet weather. So that is our plan right now, because when you're asking the same questions we've been asking this whole past year. How are the costs going to, roll out? How is this going to be equitable? How do we know we're spending money for the best benefit? And at this point, we just need more evaluation. It's really difficult to make that determination right now.
That sounds good. And I think I would definitely support that being one of the priorities is not just our ability to understand it well, but also our ability to communicate that back to the owner communities, given some of the challenges and probably the high costs that will be needed to address some of these issues. I think it'll be really helpful and important for our owners to have really clear data on what it's costing them, so that they, kind of appropriately prioritize their work. And the last thing I would just say, possibly something for us to consider in the future with our charge calculation. If managing peak flows because of poor I&I control is is costly for the district, which my understanding is it is, and it reduces the capacity overall and requires us to overbuild ourselves. It may be worth considering some sort of progressive charge that would emphasize the cost of that I&I infiltration. So rather than having it just be straight, yep, we're charging you more if you have more, maybe we should even at some point look at charging sort of exponentially more if you're not managing that kind of excess and that peak flow well. So something maybe for us to consider in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Sarah, you're up next. And then
Thanks.
Ezra, and then Beth.
Thanks. Jen, I just had a question. If you go back to the slide on the implementation ramp up, it's really a question for understanding. I'm not understanding why the costs go up year over year. It seems like there's a lot of startup exploration. I would have thought that there would be more startup exploration costs as we're doing this studying and putting all the pieces in place, and then less costs in later years. So Can you help me understand that?
Sure. So, 2021 budget obviously is what we have right now. So we're, going to try to do what we can this year to start the model updates and start developing a little bit of guidance documents as we're kind of trying to work through some of the details of how this program might be implemented. And then 2022 is continuing into model update flow monitoring plan. So we're still doing a lot of I would say maybe office work. A lot of kind of desktop analysis at this point. And then that capacity and cost effectiveness evaluation is dovetailing on the model results. So we're doing a lot of model simulation, working with Brown and Caldwell. Most likely I'm going to bring that engineering services to the next meeting. And because it's just, we're still trying to work out then where would we want to flow monitor. We just don't want to stick, it's cost, flow monitoring does have a cost. It's not as costly as some other types of investigative methods, but the majority of that cost ramp up is for flow monitoring and then analyzing all of that data. So until we know where we want to put the meters, we don't want to spend that money. So we're expecting by 2023, we're potentially starting to put some meters in the ground, and that's where the cost increases. And in the detailed plan, I believe almost it was around $380,000 of the $500,000 for annual costs was for just flow monitoring. So that's our biggest cost.
Thank you. Super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ezra, then Beth.
And thanks for the good presentation. I wondered about, I think I understand probably where the technical committee of owner community representatives is coming from in wanting to do this sort of local control thing. But if I'm understanding the problem correctly, there's a local systems that feed into us portion of the problem, and there's a MMSD portion of the problem. And I guess first it'd be a clarifier. Are we not addressing the MMSD portion of the problem when we go this route, or am I missing a way in which we're doing a both and? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. The district recognizes that we do have I&I in our system, and that is being addressed through our capital improvement projects, like the annual lining projects, or where we're noting we have annual manhole rehab projects. So we are every year doing work and projects towards maintaining our system.
Okay.
So
Great. No, I know. I'm glad I was misunderstanding it because it struck me as, wait a minute. I mean, you can take a good idea too far, but we're not. So good. Well, I think that's it then. I might have asked about sort of the percentages of what's on our side and what's on the local community side and the private side, but I don't think I need to go into that level of detail. Not having that clarification you just provided. Apart from that, I think the approach here sounds good. I'm liking what I'm seeing. Thank you.
Okay, Beth, you're up.
Thanks. I also agree. I support the program. I think it looks really good. I just have a comment, and that is, as we go through this program, there's going to be, and this is building on Grant's comments, is that as we go through the program, there's going to be increased costs to the owner communities. And I think it's going to be really important to make sure that we really are clear about the cost versus benefits to the owner communities. So, what benefits in the long run will the owner community see as they invest in this program? So that's really my comment.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Brad, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just, well, I'd like to echo the comments that Beth made. I think it's a very good program. I think the report from the consultant was very well done, and I'm in total agreement with the approach at this point. And I know we'll learn more as we get more information as the model is updated. And I think we need to be flexible to respond to what we learn over time as the program progresses. The technical committee that included representatives from the other communities, that represents, I don't know what percentage of our owner communities, but I think that it would be important, and you probably are already intending to go out to the rest of the owner communities to share the consultant report and the recommendations that are included in it. And I think it would be important to try to get everybody on board with how we're proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Anyone else?
Tom, I might chime in with one other thing.
Go ahead, Ezra.
I didn't get to my raise hand button fast enough, but just building off of what Commissioner Bookland said, I guess I'm curious to bounce this off of you, Jen, and see if you agree. But to my mind, there are benefits that go back to the owner communities around savings, avoided future charges because they're not sending us as much volume through I&I, right? So there's that sort of direct piece of it. But I think of our I&I work as also kind of hedging against chlorides requirements in the future, and sort of tying into some of those other program areas that we're working on as well, where we see, the specter of really huge costs in the future and worst case scenarios. And these things are sort of proactive work we do in the interim to avoid having to ever go there. Huge capital, big O&M around, treatment of chlorides, let's say, or some of those other things. Is that second part another sort of benefit, area we can make sure to emphasize when we're selling this program to the customer communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is part of the one water concept. It's stormwater and groundwater that's getting in, and then the way that we are set up with the treatment plant, we pump everything away. Effluent discharge goes into a different watershed. So, one of the big things we're seeing, is with the groundwater levels for drinking water, are being lowered. They're getting chlorides in. You're just basically, you're taking more of that water that you want to stay and sending it away. So, as much as we can keep it out of the sanitary, then it's staying where it needs to be. We're not having to treat it. We are not using the extra energy to pump that water through all of our pumping stations, the energy to treat it and then pump it away. Obviously with the chlorides, we currently don't have treatment methods for removing chlorides. So again, that is just more that's getting in and getting passed along. So, as I did mention, I love it. It keeps getting little plugs at most of the commission meetings through various topics. So, when we are thinking about this, it really does have a piece in all of our initiatives. And the largest piece, right, is that capital investment. If we needed to increase our pumping effluent discharge, it's $75 to $100 million is the estimate just for that, if we needed to add more pumping out just for the pipes. So, and if we're having to increase that, that means we're having to increase probably capacity all the way upstream. So, it just carries all the way down the line.
One of the other aspects of this that will be really important we discuss with the owner communities is if you think that if I invest $500,000 in I&I reduction in my collection system, that I'm going to see a return on investment of a reduction of $500,000 in service charges over the life cycle of the pipes that we're fixing. And it's not going to work out as a direct relationship because there are other avoided risks at play here. What is the value of raw wastewater not getting into people's basements? What is the value of raw wastewater not getting into our lakes and streams? And that is usually a little bit more difficult to create a financial business case, but there is the environmental and public risk part of it. We also realize, and we know just through the monitoring we already do, that there are some of our owner communities have a significant I&I challenges versus others have less so. And so we will be applying more intense resources to help some of those communities that really have significant I&I issues that we're already aware of.
Okay, Grant, you have your hand up.
Yeah, at risk of belaboring, I just wanted to emphasize what most folks have been saying, that I think my primary concern with this initiative is that at the end of the day, if we're not able to really clearly articulate the costs and benefits, including how we actually charge for, my concern is that if we are sort of leaving things up to owners to make their own investments and we're not effectively communicating what I think is really well understood here and within the district around the true costs and benefits and how dispersed they are, my concern is that it may be really difficult for a number of owner communities to prioritize the needed investment to make a difference. So I just want to, I think that's been said by a lot of folks in different ways, but I think that really needs to be a priority of this initiative. Is either we have to take control to do it and not just leave it up to local communities, or we have to find a way to communicate what we understand and know about how important and valuable it is, because I think it would be really disappointing if we do this initiative, we feel like we've laid it all out there, we encourage, we try and use carrots instead of sticks, et cetera, and we just don't see the improvement that I think we're all hoping for. So just wanted to really emphasize that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Grant. I think you're getting a sense of the commission's direction. I think they generally like the program. There's some qualification, as Grant's mentioned. And I want to make a comment that basically relates to that, is that Grant had talked about having a charge rate that would go up depending on how much more water you put in the system. And I think that might be important to consider, because you may get a point of diminishing return with improvements, and that a community may say, hey, what we're having to pay to the district is not offset by the costs that we have to pay to get to the I&I. And so I think that's kind of just the whole thing that we as a district and our customer communities and everybody have to look at is where's that sweet spot where putting money in, you get a certain return, but that return diminishes over time, and that maybe you get to the point where it's not worth putting in the improvements. And I do agree with Michael that whole bit. How do you qualify or quantify rather the keeping out water or a sewage that buckled up into somebody's basement? There's a lot of quantitative factors that can go in from not just cleaning, but the whole loss efforts and things by the family not being able to properly use their household. So is there anything more you want, Jen, or have you gotten pretty clear direction?
I was just going to put the last couple of questions up. And I appreciate all the discussion just from basically the principles. So kind of lost sight of getting to the study session questions. But I think our first question that I'm hearing general agreement, like you said, President Hubble, with the direction of the program. Clearly, obviously, the big question, which we recognize and have had ourselves, is the cost and the benefit for the program compared to the cost. So I guess the other couple of questions that I did have was, are we moving fast enough with developing this program? I think that was a question that came up last year, was, because this is a long-term program. It takes time to implement this. So just kind of wanted to do a check-in on our 5-year implementation plan and get a sense for the speed. And question three is also with the ramp-up plan. So, and if there were any recommendations on the proposed principles, but there was a lot of great discussion. So I'm not sure if anybody else has any other thoughts on these questions.
I think Brad had mentioned to make sure that you do outreach to the communities that are not represented on the technical committee. So I don't know how many outreach points you have, but you probably come up with some type of a way to. Sarah, you have your hand.
Yeah, Jen, just to directly answer the question from my perspective on speed and the proposed ramp up plan, it makes sense to me intuitively that this would take time to implement, especially because the change management component of bringing our owner communities along with us is so important to this, and getting that done right and comprehensively. So yes, if we could move faster and invest more and get the report done faster, I'm always inclined to do that. But I think what counters that for me is the need for really thorough engagement. So I appreciate that the speed seems to be balancing those two aspects right now. So I'm comfortable with the direction in terms of speed and the ramp up plan as you proposed it.
Thank you.
Hey, Grant.
Yeah, I would just comment on the question number 4. And I think our conversation may be covered in the 4 principles that were laid out. I guess that last one, for example, the balance providing appropriate regional benefits with respecting local control of funds. I don't know if it's included in there or if it would be worth sort of calling out an additional principle, but I think this question of ensuring that we are sort of both communicating and it's reflected in our charge structure, the true costs and benefits of these improvements, so that we have, to the degree that we're leaving action up and expecting it from our owner communities, that their incentives are aligned appropriately through our cost structure, and that we are confident at the end of the day that that sweet spot that President Hubble mentioned, that to the degree we have knowledge of these impacts, and making sure that our owner communities, to the degree that they're responsible for implementing changes, should basically be on the same page with us. So I don't know exactly captured under those principles, but that feels like a really significant one for me, because if this were wholly within our walls and we were just going to allocate some money for it and our staff was going to carry it all out, that would really not be an issue, right? We would just have to make sure our owner communities trusted that we were doing that work. But here, I feel like it's just a whole different beast to really make sure that they're fully participating to the level that we believe or know is important.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Anybody else? Ezra, you have another comment?
I just wanted to echo Commissioner Eskrich's, feeling good about numbers 2 and 3. And I might just add, the piece that also requires us to take a little more time and really understand it is monitoring in that second year, next year. And that's key, I think, to really get our arms around what is happening out there through the collection system and the sort of hydrology or the water budget of all of it and that side of it. And so I think that's what leaves me comfortable with the pace, but also comfortable with the increased investment over time.
Okay, thank you, Ezra. I think you've got the answers, Jen. I think if you could move faster, but I think we feel that the public engagement and particularly engagement with our customer communities is important, and that we'd rather do it right. And one question just kind of popped into my mind for you to consider is, we don't know what the rain events are going to be over the next couple of years or 3 or 4 years when you're monitoring, but is there a difference from how large if we don't get large events, is that monitoring going to be effective for what really happens if you get, a large event, because you're going to get different inflow and infiltration. I go back to 07 and 08 when we had all those rains over such a significant period of time and all the snow, and people's basements were flooding even though they had 2 sump pumps running, and so all that water is going down in the basement drain just because high groundwater. And if you don't have that type of condition over when you monitor, how does that affect the whole program? But that's just something for you to consider.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately that does a lot of the times happen. You put in flow meters and it stops raining. So yeah, ideally you're getting a wide variety of rain events and more significant rain events. So yes, that is a challenge, but that's if we I am proposing a business case for the CIP this year for some long-term flow monitoring locations. And, if we have that consistent data from year to year, that will only help us as we go further to make sure that we're capturing as much rain events and response to the system as we can.
Okay, I think that covers everything. I think you have enough marching orders. It was a good discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
So that will take us to the Chief Engineer and Director's report. Michael?
Thank you, President Hubble. I have 2 reports. One, April 15th is always a very special day. For one obvious reason, taxes are due. But it's also the day where our permit required seasonal operation will begin of disinfection at midnight tonight. And I'm really pleased to say that our new system, UV disinfection system that started to be built in October of 2020, is operating. It's complete. The final training occurred this week, and will be ready to go into service this evening. A few little nuggets for this project. The new system includes 180 amps, 180 lamps instead of the old system of over 3,700 lamps, which reduces staff maintenance costs significantly, and treats the wastewater at the same safe level or greater for 1/3 less of the energy costs. So we expect the new system to save us approximately $16,000 per year in just electrical costs alone. So we're really pleased with the work. that engineering and operations put forward to get this project done on time. And so it'll be an exciting new period as we move this project forward. So the second one is we wanted to share with you an emergency situation that we've identified. We have two or force main sewers that cross the belt line on their way to the plant, and through work that's being done on the belt line and the removal of pavement, they uncovered some raw wastewater in the median, which is extremely concerning to us, a gray water leak. And so we've been over the last week or so trying to evaluate where the leak is coming from, and we're still evaluating it. And this to me is into the emergency category, because we don't know, even though we know we have raw wastewater discharging, and we know that it at some level is creating a threat to public health. It does require immediate action because we don't know what's happening under the pavement of the belt line. And so we're moving forward with negotiated procurement, and not seeking formal competitive bids to get some of the repairs made once we identify the sources of those problems. But to provide a little bit more context and background on what we're doing, Director of Engineering Bruce Borelli is going to share with you a little bit of what we know so far and kind of where we're taking this.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'll go on video here, hopefully just for a little bit. Then I think I'm going to go off video because I want to share this with our GIS system, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work if I have my video on. So I'm going to go off video now and then start sharing my screen. Amanda, you can see everything. Does that look good, Michael?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Looks good.
This is our GIS system. So just to get everybody oriented, what we're talking about in general is our pumping station 7 force mains. Pumping station 7, just to get everybody oriented, this is the bottom of Lake Monona, the Yahara River. Belt line goes to the middle. This is Southtown Drive and then the treatment plant. Pump station 7 is located on the Yahara River on Bridge Road. I'll see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Right next to this used to be Jingles on the River. It's changed. It's a restaurant next door to us. Just rehabbed the station right on the corner of Bridge Road and again the Yahara River. 2 force mains come out of the station. Both are 36-inch diameter, and one was built in 1948 when the station was built, and one was built in 1963. And most of the time, both force mains are in service. They run side by side all the way up Bridge Road. They cross the old belt line, which is now Broadway, go through the WPS campus, and then cross the belt line. And actually are underneath First Supply Building. There's a long history story with that. None of this was here when the force mains were built, and all this was built over us. But again, they're side by side, the 2 pipes, until they get to the treatment plant, cross the railroad tracks, and then they join into one pipe on the campus here on the treatment plant grounds. And then they become one 48-inch pipe that goes up to and discharged to the headworks building. Where we're seeing this leak is in the median of the belt line. Specifically, this is First Supply's boneyard, if you will. Specifically where they're doing this flex lane work, where they're removing the concrete in the middle of the road there. Everybody's driven the belt line and seen that most of the work is at night. But I will switch. The leak is right in the middle of the belt line. And it's just in general, very difficult to get there. You can't even really get there during the day. We have to have the sheriff stop traffic just to get personnel out there. It's just a difficult spot and a very high risk spot in general. If we had any sort of problems, the consequence of failure in this area is very, very high, as you can imagine. This is what it looked like last Monday. Ray and his crew are out there. This had been dry. Again, you can see they took out about 12 feet of pavement here, sawed it out, and then, you know, busted, rubbleized the concrete. And it hadn't rained as of last Monday. We had all that rain last week, but this is before the rain. So you can kind of see, you know, what it looked like. This smelt like, looked like, and we tested it. You know, it was raw wastewater. You can see how it boils up, was boiling out, not excessive or anything like that. It took some sand with it, but in general, it was just being trapped in this area. There was a little pile of gravel down here. So none of this water that leaked out made it to the surface waters, to the lakes or anything. It just boiled out here and then almost infiltrated back in, as it went down and was traveling this way. So we reported this, we estimated it at 1,500 gallons, and that was basically a length, a width and a length and a depth, but none of it made it to the surface waters. Ray and his crews have been monitoring it daily, and monitored it after this and looked at where the storm sewers exited and did not see any evidence that it made it to the storm or to the lakes or anything. So what we did was we turned off the pump station, and the water stopped, which we expected. Again, these are just, it boiled out in different spots. You can see it bubbling here. Here's another picture of that where it was boiling out of that, and it makes us just very nervous. We don't know if it's right in this location. This is where it's boiling out, but it could be underneath the lane of traffic. We just don't know how water travels underground. And again, if there were problems on the belt line, the consequences are high in a hurry. So I mean, these are all pictures of last Monday. Since last Monday, we've been we had it off for a day or two, and then we said, well, we got to figure out which force main it is. Is it the 1948 force main, or they're both concrete force mains? They're both reinforced type concrete force mains, and we're trying to determine which one it was. And since last Monday, we've been going from one force main to the other force main, trying to get more flow, run more pumps through that station, and the water hasn't surfaced again. This is where the leak was. You can kind of see it here. This is where the leak itself was. And it hasn't surfaced again. Now, the water may be staying subsurface. The pipe is about 7 or 8 feet down. And when the belt line was built, again, there was nothing here when those force mains, it was a cornfield and an airport when they were installed. And when it was built, the belt line, the DOT put a cap over both of the force mains, a concrete cap, and that makes the situation almost worse because we don't know where the cap could be. The leak could be running underneath the cap. The cap doesn't go all the way around the pipe. It only goes around to the center line of the pipe. So we don't know. That makes the problem worse. And then if we dig down here, and then we got to bust out the concrete. If the leak was in this magical 12-foot, width, then we'd have to bust out the concrete, and likely that could damage the pipe even more. So, I mean, what we're thinking right now, again, we have it. We have the redundancy. We have the ability to manage the flow. We have station 18. We can always divert flow to station 18. We did that last Monday when we shut it off. So, I mean, the flow is we have it in control. The leak was notified again to the DNR and to the public. Amanda put it in the state journal. So we did everything with our CMOM requirements. We don't know what caused it. The force mains were inspected as part of our inspection program back in 2019, and there were no leaks detected in the force mains in 2019. It could have been when they busted out the concrete. Yeah, I mean, they took one of those big guillotine hammers and busted up the concrete. So it could have vibrated it. We don't know. The leak may have been there for a long time. But again, if there is a failure, it would be a severe consequence. And as Michael said, we're treating this as an emergency right now. So then the next steps right now is we've been trying to get this to surface again and haven't had luck. So tomorrow we're going to get a small backhoe out here and do some digging and get some of the overburden off of it and see what we can see then. We may use some ground penetrating radar to see if there is any voids underneath, where it hasn't been, out in the lanes of traffic here. Hopefully that's not the case. We would have to do it in the night. But the plan right now is to, I think I can share it if I go back to my screen, is this concrete cap runs from fence line to fence line. It's about 300 feet. The plan right now is to excavate on either side of that, outside of the road, and line these one at a time. And it's a special liner, a pressure liner. It's different than when you line gravity sewers. It's a different animal. It's got some fiberglass in it. The resin is different, but that's going to be the next steps most likely. And it'll take likely weeks, several weeks, if not several months to do these, to line these. And I mean, in general, I think it's a good practice at this point to do it. I mean, the force main, the old one is 1948. It's 70 years old, it's over 70 years old already. And to just leave it or try to patch it even in the median, if we could magically find it there, I think it would be better just to in general, line the whole thing under the belt line. The consequences are just too high in this area. So that's what our plan is. And as Michael said, I've engaged with several contractors about excavating pits on the side of the roads and starting to get the materials and do this. So this will be ongoing for several weeks, if not maybe even several months. So that's what I have as far as, let me just look at my notes here. I don't think I have anything else. Again, if there is a problem, we can divert the flow to station 18. Station 18 can handle it. Right now, we're just trying to figure out which one of the two it is and start with that one. But again, hopefully in the next couple of days, we'll have more info on that.
Bruce, maybe to share with you, I mean, I know the costs are still uncertain, but based on our normal lining projects, what is just a general ballpark for lining both of these pipes? You've given some very broad figures.
Both of them, you're talking the distance from fence line to fence line is 300 feet. Both of them, it could be $1,000 a foot altogether. So you'd be talking $500,000-$600,000. And it's on an emergency basis too. So hopefully it would come in that, but I would think it could be in that range, Michael, 500,000 to 600,000.
And if we were to put this out for public bid, how much delay would we incur in getting plans and specs done and the like?
By the time we got it advertised, got plans and specs and got it advertised and bid and awarded and started, you're probably talking 4 to 6 months, most likely.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Ezra, Ken?
I was going to say, first off, thanks for the presentation, Bruce. Is there a chance we might figure out which pipe it is and only be able to do half of that, by doing one, not both?
That's a great question. We've been talking, that's what we've been trying to do here for the last week and a half is try to isolate which one. We haven't had any luck with that. Again, they're both older assets. I think at this point, if we're in there and doing one, it might be, there's some economies of, the two pipes are 15 feet apart is moving over and doing the other one. Yeah, it's going to cost more, but there is mobilization costs and all that. So, it's something that we have kicked around and we said, well, we just don't know which one it is, so we should just line them both. But maybe tomorrow we'll have a definitive answer too, and then we would have to evaluate it at that point, Ezra.
That makes sense. And the second thing I was going to ask is, when otherwise were we maybe going to come around to lining these force mains between this pumping station and the plant? Anyway, did you have that on the horizon in the CIP, or would that otherwise have been even farther down where it wasn't even programmed yet? What do you think?
Yeah, it's not programmed yet. No, we're just the infancy of our force main inspection program. We just started it up and tried to inspect these. They're difficult to inspect in general. I mean, when we did what we did in 2019 is, we sent a special, they call it a smart ball through the pipe and obtained GPS locations, but more importantly, to look for leaks acoustically. And we didn't find any, like I said, but didn't really look at the pipe structurally. To look at them structurally, that's an order of magnitude difference. And I mean, it's a great question. Maybe we, at some point, some of these force mains, we should just start programming them to be lined just like a lot of our interceptors, and especially in critical spots like this. I mean, if it's to be honest with you, if it's, if this was in, WPS's parking lot up here, it's probably not the end of the world. I mean, yeah, it's not good, don't get me wrong, but here in the middle of the belt line is a different animal. So, it's a great question, and I think maybe something that Todd and I and Jen should talk about, or the team in general, is that maybe we should start programming some of these force mains to get them lined or replaced. But they do pressure linings for water mains all the time. We have not done one like this for a force main, but it is available. But that's a great question.
Thanks,
Since
Bruce.
since we have not been able to isolate, I'm a structural engineer, and what got my concern up very quickly on this, and I haven't been getting much sleep, is the belt line is a reinforced concrete pavement. It's a rigid pavement, so it has a tendency to bridge cavities for a long time until they catastrophically break, versus asphalt, which is a flexible pavement, which sags over time and gives you a little warning that things are getting bad. And this could have been, this area could be undermining for a long period of time. And that's why the ground penetrating radar may give us some answers. But this investment in these lining projects, I think, is well worth the effort now, because if we were to have a catastrophic failure, we could just add zeros to this number, of closing the belt line and rerouting traffic. And I hate to be the person that kind of says, let's think of the worst case, but here it has all the conditions where that could be a scenario, and for a $500,000 to $1 million of lining work here, we would reduce our risk significantly. And that is what our capital fund reserves are for. That's why we have, when Bruce reports every year that when projects come in under budget and we have excess reserve capital funding, we have it in a location to utilize for these types of projects up to a certain point. And then the other piece is, we're not in a crisis yet. So in 2 weeks, we'll be able to come back and say, what have we learned more, and keep the commission apprised as we move forward with this effort. And hopefully it's resolved without any consequence. But I'm very concerned about the situation.
Okay, well, we have 3 more people. This is not even an agenda item, so I just make it quick because I don't want to get into too much of a discussion of being a non-agenda item. We got Ken, Beth, and Brad.
All right. Yeah, Bruce, lining this makes a lot of sense, and it's a decent option to fix this. Any evidence of this issue prior to the start of construction on the belt line?
No, again, it could have been there for a long time. It's all under pavement. But no, there was no evidence of anything prior to that. I mean, and we may need to have some discussions with WISTOT at some point, but we got to figure out what's going on first. But no, there was no evidence. And how we found it was our collection system services were out there doing locates for the flex line, the flex lane work. And again, if you try to get out there right now, you can't get out there. But they were out there and were able to get into this area and mark it, and then they noticed it. So we had no idea prior to that, and that's how we found it out.
Okay, thank you.
Beth, get your hand up.
Yeah, it just leads me to wonder. I mean, the fact that we found this digging up through the belt line and that this has probably been going on, we don't know how long. And we've got pipes underneath buildings, underneath parking lots, underneath other things. And these pipes are pretty old. So this just leads me to think that, you know, there may be other leaks that are happening that we have no idea of either. And so, you know, thinking about longer term, I think we need to start thinking about, you know, replacing or lining these pipes in the future. And I think that's just my thought is, you know, this might be the sign of something, you know, other things that we need to, you know, kind of keep track of and be aware of.
Agreed. Again, if nothing else, maybe we need to ramp up our inspection program more. We have started it, but if you really want to get into structurally looking at these, again, I think we have $100,000 budgeted. That isn't going to get it done. But I mean, great comments in general.
Okay, Brad.
I appreciate the update, and I'm assuming that you've discussed this with Attorney Kent and that he's comfortable with the approach that you've taken to negotiate with one consultant contractor to get the work done. And assuming you have the authority to proceed as you've described, I'm fully in support of that, and I would echo Tom's comments that we should maybe put this on the next agenda so that we can actually have a discussion and get an update on what's going on. So thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Thank you for all the comments or questions to Bruce. And yeah, Michael, it's not a bad idea to have it on the next agenda item. And I think you had the authorization to allow for emergency use. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I'm done.
Oops. Paul, you have the regulatory and legal review?
Yes, and first I apologize for not getting a written report to you. I will have that at our next commission meeting. But there hasn't been a lot that's changed, just a couple of things that I would like to highlight. One, we noted in our last update that there was this disinfection guidance that the department had issued, and it raised many of the same issues that we talked about in the context of our permit were being now raised kind of statewide. There were a number of comments that were submitted in response to that proposed guidance. And we found out yesterday that based on those comments that the guidance has been pulled and there is no timetable for when they will revisit that. So at least for right now, that's off the table. I would suspect that now that that's off the table, that there may be a final resolution to our permit issue, because I think that guidance may have complicated a few things. So we'll look for that. I think we reported last time that we finally have some labs that are certified for wastewater sampling for PFAS. And some of you may have noticed the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce lawsuit on PFAS sampling. And for those of you that haven't followed it in detail, basically they sued to stop the sampling program. And what the court ordered was that the sampling may continue, but that the results would not be made public. So there has been essentially a temporary restraining order on releasing any of the results. That said, what I know from monitoring this statewide, there's now approximately 70 to 80 treatment plants other than the district that have been sampled, and those results, will eventually be made public. So I just wanted to pass that along. Other than that, everything else is pretty much on hold. But we do anticipate some additional developments within the next couple of months on PFAS surface water standards, and we'll continue to update you on that as that happens. Otherwise, I'd be glad to entertain any questions anybody has.
Okay, any questions? No, I don't see any, so we'll move on to future meeting schedule. That's in the packet, or separate from the packet. And then we have the closed session. Do we have a motion to convene in closed session in accordance with 1985 1C of the Wisconsin statutes, consider employment, promotion, compensations, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercise responsibility. That's, I'm reading off the on-base view. If I go to the actual
I'll make
one,
that motion, Tom.
yeah, it's a 360 personnel performance review. Okay, motion by Commissioner Meyer. Do we have a second?
Second, Commissioner Clark.
Second by Commissioner Clark. And Janelle, you want to do the roll call?
Of course. Commissioner Bookland,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Eskridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Foster,
Aye.
Commissioner Hobble,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Swanson.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion carries, and we, those who are
Uh,
able have the invitation to join room 1. Thank you.
Commissioner Hubble, this is Paul.
Yes.
Just before you break, I presume that you do not need me for this session.
Yeah,
I-
I don't think we do, Paul. Thanks for the
Okay.
offer, though.
If so, please feel free to contact me back on my cell phone, and I would be able to join. But otherwise, I will let you guys proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Janelle, are you present?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, so we had a motion by Commissioner Murphy, second by Commissioner Clark to reconvene into open session, and that motion was by roll call and all voted aye.
Okay.
And then that leaves us with the discussion of action items taken. Sarah, did you want to review it or do you want me to?
I'm happy to.
Go ahead.
So in closed session, we reviewed the chief engineer and director's performance as our employee in the calendar year 2020. We accepted his goals for 2021, and they'll be recorded in his personnel file. We also appreciate and acknowledge the great work of the chief engineer and director over the past year, but he is not eligible for a performance-based pay increase as he's at the top of his range. So there will be no performance-based pay increase this year. And the chief engineer and director is eligible for his 10-year sabbatical. So he's eligible for a 4-week sabbatical per his employment agreement with the commission. So those should be actions recorded out of our closed session.
Okay.
And the other piece of context, I apologize, I should add this as well, in the open session, Janelle, for the minutes, that we will be convening in future meetings to discuss organizational performance and monitoring into the future, as our discussions in closed session were specific to employee personnel performance. So we'll look forward to doing that at a future session in open session.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you to the committee, and thank you, Michael. So I think that goes to future agenda topics. The only thing we talked about was the issue with the belt line, other business, and then adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion, Commissioner
Motion by
Clark.
Commissioner Clark.
I'll second it, Commissioner
Second by,
Bookland.
second by Commissioner Bookland. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Commissioner Eskridge, would you mind holding on, or Commissioner